Okay, let's get started. Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. We are going to be looking at Microsoft Excel today and running through a few of the key features and then looking at a couple of tips and tricks that we use to help us utilize Excel in a productive way. So just going to run through our agenda first of all. We're going to start by looking at conditional formatting and then how we can use conditional formatting to help us identify duplicate entries. Following that, we're going to look at pivot tables. Pivot tables are a really useful tool for when you're trying to interrogate and understand your data in a bit more detail. Following that, we will look at the Copilot function, which is a new function in Excel that enables you to use Copilot to interact with some of your data. And then we will finish with a few time-saving tips and shortcuts that we find useful and wanted to share. So most of today's webinar will be a live demonstration. So the first thing I'm going to do is just load up my Excel file here. So I've got that on the screen. Excellent. So what I've done for today's demo is I've got a demo sales report that has been created, and this has been created by Copilot for me, so it's all dummy data, and it helps to show all of the different features of Excel that we're going to be looking at. So as I mentioned, the first thing that we are going to look at is conditional formatting. So conditional formatting is a really useful tool that enables you to sort of identify at a glance trends in your data or highlight certain information. So the first thing we're going to look at is our sales amounts. So as I say, we've got a sort of sales report here with a whole bunch of information, including things like order number and employee name. We've got the sales amount, the units sold, and we've also got some customer feedback and the quarter that the sale was completed in as well. So we want to highlight any of our sales that were over £30,000 because those are our high value sales. We want to be able to identify them nice and quickly. So we've selected the sales amount column. Then we're going to go up to our conditional formatting button here, which is on the home tab of the ribbon. And we're going to select to highlight cells. We want, as I mentioned, to highlight those that are over 30,000. So we're going to select highlight cells that are greater than. We're going to enter the amount into the first field there at 30,000. And now for us, the high values are good. So we want to highlight those with green so we can quickly identify them. And that's as simple as it is, really. We've very quickly there been able to identify which of those sales are high value to us just at a glance. Now, obviously, we can do more with conditional formatting. So that's what we're going to do. What we want to be able to do, and a nice thing that conditional formatting can do, is show us how each sale sort of appears within the range of the data. So we want to go back up to conditional formatting after we've selected our sales amount column. And we're going to go to color scales. So color scales will imply a gradient to a range of cells. So the color will indicate where each cell falls within that range. So it automatically identifies, understands what the range is, and then creates the gradients for us. Now there's obviously a few different ones that we can use. The most common are going to be the first two here. The first one being where green is the highest number, and the next one being where green is the lowest and red is the highest. Now again, for us, this is a sales report, so the higher the number, the better it is. So we're going to click on that first one, and now we can see we've got a nice range. And we can quickly identify that this is probably our highest sale because it's the most green cell that's being shown. And then we've got this one, these ones which are really nice and red. So those are our lowest sales, and we can really quickly identify those as well. We can do more as well. So the next thing we're going to do, if you decide you don't want to highlight the entire sales amount, the entire column or row, sorry, you can, rather than doing that, you can use icon sets. So these again are icons. Rather than highlighting the whole cell, we can indicate quite quickly by using different icons, red, blue, and yellow, green, yellow, and red, which ones are high and which ones are low. So you can go through and you can pick which different icons you want, and then Excel will automatically assign them. Now, there's a lot more that you can do with conditional formatting. Microsoft have tried to make it as simple as possible by adding in the quick and simple rules. So you've got things like highlighting greater than and less than, but you can also look for text that contains or specific dates. Another really nice feature is being able to use the data bars. These show quite nicely how, again, within that range, how high things are. So we can see there, Bob Smith, that sale was 99. That was our highest of all of the range, the highest of the range of units sold in this spreadsheet. So you can take it further, and if you want to get deeper and manage all of your rules and set multiple rules, you can create all of them yourself by going to manage rules, and then you can create multiple rules for a set of columns and rows, but we're not going to go into that today because most of the time using these options that Microsoft had pre-built for us, it's going to be sufficient for most people. So one thing to note as well, if you want to remove any conditional formatting nice and quickly, you can highlight the cells, click clear rules, and then you can either click clear the rules from the selected cells or from the entire sheet. We'll go for the entire sheet so we can go back to how we were. One last useful thing for conditional formatting is helping you to identify duplicate entries. So obviously we've got a whole bunch of orders here. Before we perhaps process this or send it out to a client, we just want to double check that there's no duplicates that have made their way into the data set. So we're going to go back to conditional formatting. We're going to select highlight cell rules, and we're going to use duplicate values, and we want to highlight them with red text. Now first, I made a slight error there. We need to select which column we want to do that for. So we're going to go back, we'll select our order number, we'll select those duplicate values, and we want to highlight them in red. And immediately we can see that we've got two duplicate order numbers here. So if we look at those, we can see, yeah, that's the exact same order. It has been duplicated somehow in the data set. Now, obviously, the quick option is that you can highlight the row, right click on it and click delete, and that will remove it. If you have lots and lots of duplicates, then that may not be the best option, but you can go up to the data tab here, and then you can click remove duplicates. Select which columns you want to remove, and then if we click OK, we can see that that has removed one duplicate, and now it's no longer highlighted because the conditional formatting has recognized that the duplicate doesn't exist. What I will say, please always check the data before you go ahead and just remove all duplicates, because it's worthwhile just confirming that they are indeed duplicates and there's not just some other error involved with your data. The next thing we're going to look at is pivot tables. Now, before we can create a pivot table, the first thing we need to do is turn this data into a data table. And the quickest way to do that is we're going to select all of our data. So click Control A, that will select all of the data in the worksheet. And then we're going to go to Insert, and we're going to click Table, and that will convert our data into a table, which gives us lots of nice formatting options alongside allowing us to then create a pivot table. So now we've got our table. Again, I'm going to click Control A, and we're going to go back to Insert, and we're going to select Pivot Table. And you can give your pivot table a name. I'm just going to leave it as Table 2 for now. And you can select whether you want it to appear on a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. So we're going to do it on a new worksheet, and here we have our screen that enables us to create our pivot table. Now, before we can create the pivot table, we need to understand what the four elements are. So pivot tables are created from four elements. We have filters, columns, rows, and values. So they're going to start off with rows. Rows are essentially, they dictate what appears down the left-hand side of your table. So to create add an item to any of these elements, you'll have all of your different columns listed up here in the top. And as you may have seen, I just did, you just simply drag and drop it into the element that you want that item to relate to. So I've just dragged region in, and we now have a list of our regions, one for each row. The next one is columns. So columns, again, reasonably straightforward. It will create the columns for you in the table. So for example, if we want to see by region the number of sales, by quarter, let's add the quarter tab into the columns. And now we have the region and the quarters appearing. Now, at the moment, our table is blank, and that's because we've not added any values. So values is the next thing that you'll want to add to your pivot table. And we want to know the number of sales that were completed in each region by each quarter. So to do that, we're going to drag order number down into the values. Now we can see that the grand total of orders is apparently over 500,000. Now, if we go back to our data, we can see that we've only got 50 orders here because the top row is obviously headers. So we've only got 50 orders. And the reason that that's showing 500,000 is because it's adding all of the order numbers together rather than counting the unique number of the unique orders. So to change that, we just click on the value, it'll open the drop-down menu, we click value field settings, and then rather than sum, we want it to count. So we want it to count the number of orders. And now we can see that the grand total is 50, so it's counted all of our orders, and it's broken it down into quarters by region. So we can see that in Q2 we did 5 sales in the East region, 8 in the North, and then in Q3 we did 9 and 3. So that's quite a simple pivot table, and the bit that we haven't got to, the last element of the table, is filters. So perhaps you want to see the number of orders by region per quarter, but also by product category. So then we add a filter, and what we can see is it's added to filter at the top, and we only want to see laptops, for example. And now it's updated, and we know that this data here is just showing sales that were for laptops in those quarters for each region. So we're going to run through another example of a pivot table to do that again. So hopefully it will help you understand what each section is for. So for the next one, perhaps we want to track our employees and see how they are doing for their sales. So we're going to add our employee name to the rows. So now we have each employee as a row. We want to see how many sales they were completing per region. So we're going to add region to the columns, and we now have all of our columns, all of our regions as columns. And the next thing we need to do is add our values. So again, we're going to use order number. We are going to change it from sum to count the number of orders. And now we can see how many orders were completed by each employee. Now, once you've got your pivot table, you can use the conditional formatting on your pivot table as well. So if we wanted to, this is our total number of orders by employee. So we're going to use our color scales, and we're going to go for the top one, and then we can see that Carol is quite clearly our strongest performing sales employee in terms of number of sales, and David and Emma have got the lowest number of sales. So it's really nice and easy to tell. And that is essentially pivot tables in a nutshell. They seem really complicated, but once you understand the different elements that make up pivot tables, they can become a really useful and powerful tool, and you can start getting real insights from your data. So the next thing that we're going to look at is we're actually going to do some quick tips. So one thing that Excel does quite nicely is a tool called Flash Fill. So Flash Fill is, again, it's Microsoft trying to help us and make our lives easier. And it is a way for Excel to try and identify patterns to complete the data that we're inputting. So the best example I can give of this is if we wanted to pull the first name of each employee out of this to make it nice and easy, we've added a new column for first name. Now our first row employee is Bob, so I've just typed Bob into the first column. Now the next column, or next row, is I'm going to start typing Henry, and we can see immediately that Excel has identified the pattern. It can see that I'm trying to pull out the full first name. It's suggested completing the field that I'm in, and then we can also see that it's suggesting answers for all of the other columns, all of the other rows as well. So if I hit enter, then Excel will fill that out for me and save me a whole bunch of time from having to do it manually. Obviously, something like that, you could use an Excel function to do it for you. However, doing it with flash fill is going to be easier and quicker and save you more time. The next one is a really simple tool, and some of you may be aware of this already and have used it across other programs, but it's a shortcut that I use all of the time, not just in Excel, but on websites and in documents and all over the place. But Control F essentially allows you to search through the document and find specific text. Within Excel, I find it's really useful if you're looking to find a specific row. Now, obviously, in this data set, we've only got 50 rows, so it wouldn't be particularly challenging for me to find a certain order number. So if I was looking for 1,120, I could obviously find that quite easily by just looking through the rows. But if you have a data set that's got hundreds or maybe even thousands of rows sitting there, even if it's organized and sorted in by the correct field, sitting there and strolling through is going to take you some time. So if you hit Control F, enter what you're searching for, and then just hit enter, and it will take you directly to that row. So that can save you quite a bit of time. And as I said, that works across all websites, anything in Edge or Word, when you're looking for something particular, and can be a really quite useful and time-saving tool. The last shortcut that I want to show you as well is how to do a sum really quickly. So obviously most people will know that you can obviously type in equals sum, put some brackets in and select the range that you want to create a sum for. But a really quick way of doing it is if you just highlight the range that you want to sum. Once it's highlighted, if you press Alt and equals, then Excel will automatically add a new column and a new row, sorry, and it will total that for you. So we can see very quickly we've done £1.4 million worth of sales. And there is a drop down here as well. So you have the option to do a count. So we can see there was 50 sales. We can also change that and see that the average sale is worth around £28,000. So again, just a little shortcut that can save you a bit of time. So that's all of the live demonstrations today. I'm just going to switch back here to my presentation. And the last thing that I just wanted to cover is the Microsoft Copilot function. Now, when I planned this webinar, the Microsoft Copilot function had just been announced, and I was expecting and hoping that it would be released so I could show a live demonstration of it. Unfortunately, it's still not publicly available, but it should be very soon. The Copilot function is different from using Copilot in Excel because it enables you to actually put Copilot into a cell and ask it to respond or act on some data that you give it. It does require a Microsoft 365 Copilot license, but essentially it's good for things like trying to understand sentiment, key topics, or classify information. So in that data set example that we just had, we had some feedback and we could use Copilot to understand the sentiment of that feedback, whether it was neutral, positive, or negative. So I do just want to quickly run through how that will work. So those of you who do have Copilot licenses, once it becomes available, hopefully you'll be familiar with it and be tempted to give it a try and have a test. It's reasonably straightforward to use. And there's two different options. You can use it with a single prompt and context, which is the simplest option. And essentially to call Copilot, you will essentially type in any field. You go equals Copilot, and in this example, we're asking it to review the sentiment of the feedback. So enter your prompt, which is review the sentiment of the feedback and assign it to either positive, neutral, or negative. And then we can see we've given it the context. So B1 would be the field where the feedback is contained. And then Copilot would essentially just review the feedback and decide whether it thinks it's positive, neutral, or negative, and just return one of those answers. You can go more complex with it as well and have multi-part prompts and multiple context windows. So for that, you would enter your equals Copilot, which calls the function. You start your prompt, so you ask it to classify a range. So you're essentially saying classify this data, which is B1 to B10, and then you say into one of the following categories, and then you give it the range of categories that you've selected. So you're saying, I want you to take all of the data in B1 to B10 and make it classify it to one of the options in C1 to C4. There are some really good videos on Microsoft's website. If you search for Microsoft Copilot function, you'll be able to find them, and they run through these types of examples so you can see how it works in practice. Unfortunately, as I say, it's not out yet, but I think it's going to be a really useful tool when it does get fully released. So I just wanted to quickly sum up on the various things that we've gone through today. We started with conditional formatting, which is really great for reviewing data at a glance. It helps you to highlight those key stats, whether you want to see which ones are high, which ones are low, or find certain text or duplicates in a data. As I say, if you are using conditional formatting to identify duplicates, please make sure you review them before you go ahead and just delete them all, just to make sure that you're not deleting something that isn't in fact a duplicate. Then we looked at pivot tables, which are really useful for summarizing, comparing data in a table format. As I mentioned, they seem a little bit complicated at first, but if you can understand what the four elements are and how they work together, then they are actually quite easy to use, and they can be a really, really powerful tool. So feel free to create a fake bunch of data. If you have Copilot, you can use Copilot to do that. It will create an Excel file for you. If not, there are websites online that you can use to kind of create that data, and have a play around with pivot tables, and you'll be able to understand how they work and see how powerful they can be. As I say, with the Copilot function, it's not out yet, but it will allow you to use prompts to analyze data and create new data to get even more insight into the information that you've got and use it to do more things. And then we had a few quick tips. So as I say, with flash fill, that is really where Excel is trying to identify the pattern of what you are doing. So if it can identify that pattern, it will complete the rest of the data for you and finish the work. And then the two quick shortcuts, if you're looking for specific data, Control F is a really powerful tool. And if you want to quickly sum or count or average a range of data, just highlight that range, hit Alt and equals, and it will do that for you in the next field. That is all for today. Thank you once again for attending the webinar. If we are holding these webinars every month, so please use the QR code on screen. And we're about to put up a whole bunch of webinars for sort of the next 6 months or so. So you'll be able to register for all of those. Keep your eyes peeled. They should be appearing on our website in the next day or two. And if you have a specific problem or would like some bespoke training or consultancy, then please do also get in touch, as we are able to offer those services. Again, thanks again for attending today's webinar. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and I will answer them. But otherwise, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.